Okay, so today we're going to do something just a little bit different. We're going to talk about a Bermuda castaway, a Jamestown settler, a Mayflower pilgrim, and a Shakespearean character. Plot twist, they're all one person. I was doing some research on Mayflowers and I found all kinds of beautiful pictures and gardening tips and the things you would expect to see. April showers bring Mayflowers. I also found articles about pilgrims and Native Americans and the first Thanksgiving in Jamestown and so forth. And I thought it would be fun to just do a little twist on Mayflower and focus in on the ship. What I didn't expect to find is this very interesting history of a man named Stephen Hopkins. He was on a ship called the Sea Venture that was headed for uh, Jamestown in like 1604. And it was, no, it wasn't. It was in 1609. And on the way there, there's some of the currents in the sea take you fairly far south. It's also, nicer weather. And the Sea Venture boat, it started to fall apart. And uh, they could see land. And the land they could see was an uninhabited island we now know as Bermuda. So they were washed ashore in Bermuda. There were about 150 people. They all survived the shipwreck and they were on the island of Bermuda. What they found there were turtles, pigs, fresh water, vegetation, paradise. And so this was not too bad of a deal. They were there for about 9 months. Now, the captain of the company felt responsibility to the contracts that he was under to get this group of people to Jamestown. The people were not terribly disappointed to be living in paradise and they wanted to stay. They were also, this particular Stephen Hopkins was an indentured servant. And so he had a contract and he was essentially a slave. He was earning his freedom through, his passage on the ship, and then his freedom would be years later that he owed under the contract that he signed. Well, while he was in Bermuda, he said, "You didn't fulfill your side of the contract. I am stuck in the middle of, you were supposed to, I am indentured servant in Jamestown. This isn't Jamestown. I don't owe you anything. I have the right to preserve my own life and to take care of myself, and I don't owe you anything." And he convinced a large number of the castaways to sneak off and build their own village in the wilderness and to leave and to not continue to build the ships to go to Jamestown. They were tried as mutineers. And what's interesting to me is that if you read the histories, he is painted as a criminal who broke the law, who broke his contracts, and he's seen as a bad guy. But if you take the facts of what happened and you strip away all the labels and you view all events as neutral, um, it gives you this space in your head to see that he might be the hero of this story and maybe his view that he was a free man whose contract had been breached was a fairly valid view. He was not an educated person. He didn't have the ability to write a Declaration of Independence the way that someone like Alexander Hamilton or uh, Thomas Jefferson could do. But he did make some very strong points about that power should not come from gunpowder or from authority or from inheritance, like regalness, that power should be given by the consent of the governed. And this is an idea that is um, embodied in some of the most important documents in American history, as well as in the Mayflower Compact, which he is one of the 41 people who signed that. Because interestingly, here he is in Bermuda. He organizes a mutiny. They all leave and they go back to um, he gets tried, he gets found guilty, he does his time, he's sent back to England. While he's in England, he gets married, he has children, and he decides to come to Jamestown again on the Mayflower. And so he is one of the Mayflower pilgrims. And he ends up in Jamestown in 16. Now, the Mayflower was supposed to land at the mouth of the Hudson River. It didn't. It went north. It went up to Cape Cod. And this man, Stephen Hopkins, starts arguing that there was a breach of contract and that these people no longer owe. They don't have to work out the terms of their indentured servants. And he sounds very much like a Stephen Hopkins who was in Bermuda and tried for mutiny. So he sounds very much the same. And he starts making the same thing like, hey, you put me up in Cape Cod. This is not Virginia. We are not where you said we should be. We are now free, and we can, and some people did leave the colony and go and find their fortune with Native American communities or other communities. So the ideas that he presented, oh, I forgot a point. Back in, there was a history of this colony in Bermuda. It was written, there was a report called the True Reportery, and it was sent back to England. And no other than William Shakespeare got a hold of it, and he found it to be a very compelling story. He was very interested in it. And he wrote a play which debuted in 1611 in England called The Tempest. And in The Tempest, there is kind of a drunk clown character who's not sober. That's based on Stephen Hopkins, because, of course, he was painted as the bad guy in the story. But it's not entirely fair to treat him that way because he did have some good points. So that is my history lesson for the day. There are interesting stories that you can find and new ways to interpret things. When you choose to see all events as neutral, you make space in your head to interpret a story in a new way. And I hope that you practice that. And I hope that you will follow up and learn more about Jamestown, about the Native Americans, and about the Africans who were also in that same community, which is another point that they didn't always tell you about in elementary school. Have a good night, and I will see you tomorrow.